Hey, welcome everyone. Carm Capriato, Remarkable Results Radio. Always honored to be the host of the Coalition of Automotive Management Professionals. It's called CAMP, and we do this each and every month. Bring on three experts, and guys, I have to tell you this. Stop calling yourself coaches. Start calling yourself experts.
I don't know if I'm qualified with these two guys to call myself
All
experts
right.
at that
Okay.
level.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Oh,
You know
wow.
what? All right. Well, then we have to come up with a test for Kent. Then okay.
Kent was born into it.
That's right, Kent.
There's no excuses.
You had no idea when they slapped you in the ass, Kent. The word "coach" was written there. Just to let you know, it was your dad who made sure that happened.
He's a nepo coach.
Oh my God! Hey, we're starting off really well. Here's who's with me: Bill Haas from Haas Performance Consulting at haasperformanceconsulting.com. Kent Bullard's here, Institute for Automotive Business Excellence. He's the operations manager under his dad, and I can't imagine the difficulty he has in fulfilling that role. But then that's another podcast in a different time. We are the Institute.com, and Murray Voth is here from RPM Training, rpmtraining.net. Hey, team, we always get together every month, good stuff, and we just talk about things from your expert perspective. Let's start with a great topic. Murray, this was one of the ones that you sent us. Are you asking enough questions to qualify your clients' expectations?
Well, that comes from a journey in the last few years where working with my clients, we've talked about in the past of how you have to sometimes fire a customer, client and customer. You know, we work with those words, right? Client is a relationship. A customer is a one-time kind of a deal, right? And then we talk about qualifying customers or qualifying clients to see if they're a good fit for us. And I had this aha moment at some point where I said, hang on a second. And sort of like what you said, Bill, just before Carm turned the cameras on, it's really not about them. It's really about us because we haven't actually qualified their expectations. So, for example, an assumption that I made in my years in business that was corrected quite late on in my career was that somebody bringing their car to me for the first time had been to an automotive repair shop before and kind of knew how it worked. Well, it's very different at every location. It's different at a dealer, it's different at the aftermarket, and their experience is different. So what this has been triggered by, of course, is many of the social media forums that I've been invited to, and the number of painful conversations about this customer did this to me and this customer did that to me. And I'm kind of like, how did the customer even get in the door in the first place, right? And you're obviously not meeting their expectations. So one more note on that is occasionally I'll get asked to reply to a 1-star review for a client. Like they'll say, "Hey, Murray, can you help me, respond to this professionally?" And I would say 95% of the time, that vehicle or that client should have never actually made it in the door because we didn't ask enough questions if we could meet those expectations. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that.
So, Murray, what do you suggest as qualifying questions? Because I really like this topic, and I think it's so important because I'm right there with you. It's always, how did they get in the door? So, what do you think are some examples of good qualifying questions for bringing the right people in?
First one, and again, service advisors or whoever's the one doing the intake does need to sort of read and react to the situation. And, we want to look after the person's inquiry, initially without asking a lot of questions. But one of the first things to ask them as we get started is, how do you feel about your car? That's an emotional question that they can answer. Do you like your car? Right? What are you, how long have you had your car? So making a connection to how they view that car, right?
Does your car have a nickname?
Does your car have a nickname? Thank you, Bill. Right?
Yeah.
Then we actually work with that concept with advisors where we teach them a whole list of questions that they can pick from. So for some people, we can say, "Hey, is this car currently meeting your needs?" Right? Or I think thinking about switching. So that's one question. Another question to ask And again, I'm assuming we've greeted them. We've asked them what their vehicle concerns are. We've asked them what's brought them, what they need, right? But in that early part of the conversation, if they're there for the first time, use the language, who referred you to us? Don't say, how did you find us or how did you choose us? Literally use the phrase, who referred you to us? Okay. Now, they may say Google, they may say Facebook, they may say some kind of internet thing, but you're implying that you're a referral shop. And in some cases, they're going to say, my friend, my neighbor, my this or my that. And then that'll give you some indication. You're communicating to them that you're a referral business, but also giving an indication if they were referred by somebody. And then if they were referred by somebody super cheap, cheap people kind of hang out together, right? If they were referred to somebody who's generally very like a bully, you kind of know some of the, that whole kind of a thing that you're going to get for people. So those are two common ones that we use, Bill.
So we've run into something recently. This came from a couple clients that there was a level of frustration by these shops that people would call and want an estimate on brakes. And then we got them where they could convert that call for the estimate on brakes for bring us the car, let us take a look at it. We'll pull the wheels off. We'll see exactly what you need. And then we'll be happy to give you a firm price estimate on your brake repair. So the frustration became, we got from not giving quotes over the phone and we got to converting those calls into cars in the shop, but they didn't convert to work. And the shop started to feel like we're looking at cars and we're telling people what they need and we're giving them estimates on doing a great quality job. And then they're saying, no, they're leaving. Well, what we don't know is what are they doing when they leave? Do they have their brother-in-law do it? Do they decide to try and do it themselves? Do they go to another shop that maybe they found a lower price on, whatever? So we added a qualifying question to these callers with, we'll be happy to look at your brakes today and determine exactly what you need. If your car needs brakes, will you want it done today? And boy, did that change, right? Because now we found out the people that weren't really interested, they just wanted to know what was wrong so they could tell their brother-in-law, or they wanted to know what it was so they could go back to the cheaper shop and tell them what they need, or they knew what to go buy if they wanted to try and do it themselves. So that qualifying question changed things drastically.
I love it.
I mean, it's all about setting expectations, right? If you're trying to build trust is somewhat of a byproduct, right? It's a result of something. It's whether or not the expectations that they have are either met or exceeded, right? If you meet them or you exceed them, then you're a trustworthy shop. I can trust you with my vehicle and all that. But if you don't meet the expectations I have, you're untrustworthy, right? So it's important to clarify what those expectations are. And I love this mentality of like setting that expectation, because if you run into that issue of qualifying non-qualified clients, right? You are still attracting the same type of customers through the sales call, and they're coming now into the shop, but they're not going to be customers who are going to buy what you're selling anyway at either point, right? So I love the qualifying there. You're already setting the expectation that, hey, we're going to do the work for you, right? Or are you going to do the work? Are you going to follow through on this? And yes. I think oftentimes we're very concerned with just trying to get to the immediate next step, that we don't take the time to find the right information. Because frankly, I don't want to be doing work with a customer who's not my customer, because they're going to be, it's going to be really, really frustrating for them because they're not going to get what they want. And it's going to be really frustrating for my team and myself because I'm not going to be getting what I want. It's all about really finding a win-win solution so that we can work cohesively. I want advocates. I want relationships. I want to work with people I like and trust, and that I can be somebody that they like and trust.
Yeah.
Well, and you want to spend your time where everybody benefits from the use of your time.
Yes. And Kent, you made a great point about slow down. We're always moving on to the next step because we've got to tick the boxes. We've got a technician waiting, And I believe that is one of the key things our listeners need to hear is slow down. And if you can't slow down, then you're doing something else wrong, because you're taking too many cars on. You can't slow down. And so what ends up happening is you keep saying yes and you keep making people mad. That's not the customer's fault. That's your own fault for not slowing down and following the steps. But I also wanted to dissect your trustworthy phrase, which I help some of my clients with, into two portions. One is, I trust that you will be honest financially. In other words, you will tell me what you're going to do. I'm going to get what I pay for, and you're not going to rip me off. That's one kind of trust, right? But the other one I call transparency, which is, we don't tell them white lies about the process, or white lies when the process isn't going well. We under promise and over deliver. This idea that the car can be done by noon is absolutely ridiculous, right? We should never be promising a car. We should never be promising a car before the end of a day. I mean, the supply chain, you name it, there's no way I don't believe that we should be trying to meet appointments that way, right? So it's about transparency about the process. So the 5-star reviews that I see across the industry are where clients have said, man, Kent sure looked after me. He kept me informed about the process throughout the day. That is 5-star review material all day long. Those shops have slowed down and they've communicated that process all the way across.
I'd like to add to that, because you're also teaching your customers what you do. Oftentimes they have no context as to what the work actually looks like. They just know they're going to drop their car off. When they pick it up from you, it might be expensive, and hopefully it runs, right? But they don't understand all the intricate steps that has to happen in order for the vehicle to be fixed the right way, and up to your standards, right? You're talking about the diagnostics, you're talking about the parts, you're talking about the estimation, you're talking about clarifying the work for them in your write-up so that they have an informed plan for their vehicle. That's insanely valuable. And frankly, that's something that when you speak about it, builds value in what you do. Essentially, now you can charge more, you have more resources to reinvest and provide, again, higher quality value to your clients, for the clients who want the high quality service, right? Yeah. And just talk about it. I say, preach what you practice, not practice what you preach. Meaning that you're only really talking about the things 100%, I am going to do this, right? Exactly. And everything else is in addition to that, right? Yeah. Everything else becomes an add-on versus I'm gonna preach what I practice. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna tell them, set the expectation, and meet and exceed it.
Exactly, right? Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was going to say, you brought up the promise time, and you touched on, like, promise it'll be done by noon, or promise it'll be done by the end of the day. And to your point, that's so difficult to do because there's so much that can affect, right? So what we've tried to get shops to understand is the only promise you should be making is the next time that they will hear from you.
Yes.
And keep that whole thing about, you mentioned, like, they kept me updated throughout the day or kept me updated throughout the process. That's it. To me, it's like when I call you at 10:30 in the morning and give you the estimate and ask for the sale and you agree to have us do the work, at that point, my next promise to you is I'll get the parts ordered. I'll get my technician started on the work. I'll call you around 3:00 with an update. That's my promise. Not it's going to be done today or it's good. No, that promise is the next time you will hear from me. And bam, when you do that and you're keeping people informed and they don't have to guess what's going on or wonder if my car is going to be done or when it'll be done, that's a game changer.
Yeah. Before we switch topics, Carm, I want to just throw 3 more expectation qualifiers that can help shops as well. Think about what you're good at and learn to say no to things that you're not. So, for example, you've had a great guest on, Chris Decker. I just saw a post on Instagram by him showing the brands he works on. He works on only 85% of his marketplace uses these 8 brands, and that's all he works on. And he has referrals to refer people he doesn't work on to shops in his area that work on those cars. So one is do that. A lot of my clients are beginning to qualify the kinds of vehicles they work on by age. So in other words, nothing older than 2000, nothing older than 2010, whatever, and stick to your guns, because we all know that when we let those things come in, usually it's a problem, right? We can't find the part, or parts are discontinued, or you name it, right? Thirdly, customer supplied parts, which is like 50 episodes in itself. If you have somebody who wants to do that, no, we don't do that here. That solves half of the 1-star reviews is solved by not doing that right there. And then the last one is understanding that the car is going to be left minimum for a day, and there's 3 touch points. Your appointment is with me, the service advisor, not with a technician. In fact, I forgot, I jumped ahead of myself. There's the drop off. You can drop off your car whenever it is convenient for you with our after hours drop off system. Number 1, drop off whenever, right? 2, appointment was with the advisor, either in person or on the phone after the car's been dropped off. And then 3, we will be assigning it to the surgeon when the operating room and all the other organs are available for the surgery. And then we will update you, as Bill said. Those 3 things right there will push 50% of what we call the looky-loos or the wait time wasters out the door. They won't even bother because you can't fit them in at 8:15 for a quick oil change, because we don't do those anymore.
Well, you're putting guide rails around the variability, right? Because every time you take a customer part or you work on something you're not used to, you take a really old vehicle, there's a lot of complications that'll happen. And that's where you run into issues of promise times, or issues of even whether or not you can solve the vehicle's problem, because you now have this new set of variables that you're not used to. Your techs aren't comfortable with, or don't have the same level of competency that they would with regular vehicles, right? So you're just limiting the variability, because then it makes it easier to promise and follow through on what you can execute, because now you're not dealing with this set of variables, you're dealing with this set of variables.
Yeah.
And guess who really likes it? Your technicians.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, this is what I'm good at. Give me more of what I'm good at. Why are you bringing in this 65 Mustang? I've never worked on a 65 Mustang. It's very frustrating for them. But I got to touch on, I love the fact that Murray brought up the surgeon thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is, on several occasions now, when I've been on site in the shop, one of the things that I find so disgusting is the filth and the dirt and the disorganization that you have in the shop. And I'll go into the shop and they'll have, and this will be like, this is their lead guy. This is their diagnostician. This is the top, he's at the top of the heap, right? And you go into his work area, and there's a cart over here with a bunch of tools on it. And there's another cart over here that's got a scan tool or a scope on it. And then down on the bottom, there's a bunch of parts. And so when you start to evaluate the environment that he's working in, and you go, well, what are these parts over here? Oh, that's a car I fixed last week. Well, what are those parts for? Well, it's just the stuff I took off of it. And it's like, and so I've started to use the surgeon analogy in their work environment. A surgeon is never going to operate in the operating room that was left a mess by the previous surgery. Not going to happen.
No.
Why would you do this in our environment? Why would you leave this mess and this crap and just junk hanging around? It's like, get organized, clean up, and treat your service bay, your work area, just like a surgeon treats an operating room.
Yeah.
And that I love it, because you can lean into the ethical issues there as well. I had this couple that argued with me in a class I taught a couple months ago, and we were talking about putting culture of transparency and honesty into it. And we were talking about, well, if we're going to do that, what does that look like? And that means presenting the work that we found on the vehicle. And they were questioning that. They're like, well, that just feels unjust. I'm not going to try and sell them everything. I said, hold on. I didn't say sell them everything. I said, present them, right? There's a difference there. And if you're talking about ethics, imagine a doctor goes in, he scans you, he finds these things, and he goes, well, they're going to be really upset that they have to have this surgery. So I'm just going to tell them to take an aspirin. I was like, is that ethically right? And obviously no, right? So I think I love this analogy where it's you have to have a sterile environment. Every tool has a place that it belongs. You're going to reset and refresh for every every surgery or every diagnostic, whatever that looks like, and you're going to be prepared to do the work the right way. Because again, you introduce those variabilities where you've got tools scattered everywhere, parts scattered everywhere, hearts and organs scattered everywhere. It gets really messy. I don't know. Was it the left kidney or the right kidney? I don't know which one is supposed to go in, right?
It was the appendix laying down over there. Imagine. Yeah, I just can't imagine, because we do talk about healthcare so much to our industry. And if anyone just had a clue what it takes. As a really quick side note, Tracy went to get her CVT transmission fluid changed because someone said you've got way more than the miles on her Rogue or Nissan Rogue. And so she went to Brian Pollock, where he works up at Wilco in Sanborn, New York. It took us 45 minutes to drive there. We filmed it. You're going to see some really cool reels that came out of it. And her and I were really both amazed, because I've never owned a CVT transmission, never seen a transmission fluid change on it, but it all happens from underneath, and you have to do it twice. So you have to pay for transmission fluid twice. The labor job, it was a minimum 1 hour. I really believe he gave Tracy a break as to how much he charged. And it was so interesting. And Brian, he's the diagnostician there, and he did this just out of the courtesy of his heart. And he says, I can't do this without looking at the technical service bulletins. And he's reading this and going through the 17 steps just to change it, because you got to pump the fluid in. It doesn't fill from the top.
Right.
And it was truly an amazing process. And I looked at Tracy and I said, you think the average customer knows this as to why it would be $250 to change the fluid in your transmission?
Well, but here's the thing, Carm. There are people in our industry that aren't doing that. They aren't doing it correctly. They don't have the expertise to do it correctly. And the consumers believing that they're getting a better deal and saving money by going to this guy who fails to have the expertise, to do it right. And it's like, that's wrong too.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was pretty darn impressive. Bill, I got to ask you a question about this, great new ways. We're going to fix it. Listen, when we take a look at it and we find it, are you willing to get your brakes done here? How long has it been? Can you do a little testing out in the field and maybe report back to us that these shops have started to change their language and they're closing more deals?
They're closing more deals because they're getting the right people in the shop.
Right.
Because what happens, the qualifying question is, so if you're, we'll drop your car off, we're going to get it looked at. If it needs brakes, will you want it done today? Well, no, I don't think so. I just want to know what it needs. The next statement is, we're not the right shop for you. So that car never ends up in the shop. So yeah, they're closing more because they're avoiding these people that are just wanting to know what's wrong.
It's the same thing even when you're hiring employees. They don't ask enough questions to determine if this is the right fit employee for my team.
Even go there.
I'm just saying, like, if we spend enough time or spend the right amount of time actually doing some preliminary qualification of some kind, it saves us a lot of headache later.
Yeah. This whole thing jumps right into another great question, Bill, and I want to give it to you by undervaluing our expertise. Come on, basically, we just...
Well, I think we're really good at that.
The top surgeon. I come up with the top surgeon idea here.
So I'm going to give you a real simple example. So we're doing a repair order audit, and I start to see on these repair orders that there's this labor charge of $19.95. And I'm a little bit foolish sometimes, but I'm like, I can't imagine anything that you could do in a shop today for $19.95. I can't fathom it, right? So I'm seeing this $19.95, and I'm like, so tell me, I see this what are we doing for $19.95? And the answer was, oh, that's the labor for our oil change. I'm like, excuse me? Well, yeah, that's at our maintenance rate, and we have to be really careful about that price on the oil change because people can get oil changes pretty cheap. And I'm like, I understand they can. But I said, tell me this. If I bring a vehicle to your shop who's going to do the oil change on my vehicle? And they said, well, it's going to be so-and-so or so-and-so. And this small, 3 technicians in the shop. So it's only going to be 1 of 3 people. And these are all good techs. And I said, so how can we devalue the expertise of that technician? I said, so tell me this. I said, how many tenths are we paying the technician for an oil change? And they said 3 tenths. And I said, so your labor rate's $188 an hour. When I walk through the door, it's $188 an hour. I said, but yet you're doing oil changes for $19.95. I said, so why, if I do 3 tenths at $188, the labor for that oil change should be $56.40. That's the new price for the labor on an oil change. I said, here's the deal. If you want to do $19.95, then you better go hire the 19-year-old kid who just got out of school 3 weeks ago that has no knowledge, no experience, no training, and he'll screw up half a dozen cars in his first month, because that's how you can afford to do that. But I really get frustrated with how we continue to devalue the expertise of the people. I said, when you tell the customer that your maintenance on your engine, quit calling it an oil change. It's engine maintenance is what we're performing. And it's going to be performed by an expert who has 15 years experience, 5 ASE certifications, and they're not just changing your oil. They're making sure that if there's anything else that this vehicle needs, you're going to be aware of it before it leaves here.
You know, Bill, guys, just the brilliance of watching Brian underneath Tracy's car and what he saw and how he saw what he saw. I mean, listen, it's been a bunch of years that I've been in the bays and under a vehicle, and he was brilliant for the things that he saw because of his years of experience, his common sense, and the experience that he has.
And then to conflate the issue even further, okay? Shops are like, well, okay, well, I'm going to pay that younger guy to do the oil changes, which is initially their inspections when vehicles come in. And you think to yourself, okay, so we just talked about the value of this technician who's done this for years and years and can see all this work. And the person that you want to do the initial inspection is going to be somebody who has almost little to no experience.
Yeah.
How much work are they going to find? They're like, well, I want to make sure that my top performer is cranking hours and doing that stuff. And it's like, yeah, but you're missing out because the opportunity isn't found. The actual work on the vehicle, which is an astounding number. I don't know if you guys have seen metrics on the work that needed to be done on the U.S. fleet that wasn't done. It's ridiculous how much actual work has to be done, and it's just not found and presented to the customer. Yeah. Legitimate, totally viable work. The person who's going to find that is somebody who's been doing this for a long time and has all of that experience and can convey that well enough.
Yeah, exactly. And, Carm, you're working so hard, or we're all working so hard at changing language. Mm-hmm. And Bill, that going from the $19.95 to the $56, you have to change the word. We don't do oil changes here. We do a maintenance service.
Yeah.
This is what our maintenance service costs. Let me tell you what is involved in a maintenance service. We have our experienced technicians doing proper inspections. They have years of knowledge when they look at your car. And so at the end of the day, sir, we don't do oil changes here. We do maintenance we do maintenance services, right? You change that language and again, it begins
research, testing,
all of that.
All of that.
And so in one example, it's the reaction to, well, we went from $19.95 to $56.40 on the labor side of our oil change. So now we just changed the price of an oil change by what? Let's call it $30, round numbers. Okay. Yeah. So what's the reaction?
Oh, that's too much.
No.
I can't do that.
Well, no, from the shop owner, you're right.
Yeah.
But once it happens, and once you get past that anxiety of the shop owner and the advisor making the change, right? And the customers come in and they go, wow, oil changes went up. Yes, they did. Yep. So is everything else. And that's
if that's a concern for them. And frankly, the ones who are super concerned about that, that amount more for an oil change, they'll go, well, I'm just going to go to such and such down the street because they'll do it cheaper. Great. Well, thank you.
And you might lose some, but you're not going to miss the ones you lose. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. And another transition for shops listening, that are not digital yet with digital inspections, the transition from paper to digital at the same time of going from the 19 to the 56 is also perfect timing, because now you're showing so much more value. They don't even notice the $30 difference, because it's like, wow, this is amazing what you're sending me now, right? So that for those of you listening that haven't gone that direction yet, is a great opportunity to do two things at the same time.
I think, oftentimes we look at this and say, okay, I'm going to charge more now. I'm going to have to do a bunch more work. And it's like, look, one of the biggest issues you had is you didn't communicate everything you were already doing, meaning that the customer didn't have any perception of value around it. And so what you're doing is you are now talking about it the right way, and that builds more value. If you want to add additional things like, hey, we're going to do a comprehensive plan for you, and that's part of our premium and service, right? Then go ahead and do that. You're doing the majority of the work already, but let's actually talk about it. Let's articulate that to the customer so they understand the value behind everything you're doing. I mean, Carmen, you were talking about this guy who was a master of his craft. Let's show the customer what that actually looks like in detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's amazing, guys, to see what was done on her car, and for Tracy to sit there from a consumer's perspective and say, I had no idea. She was glad to pay for what happened. A master, Bill Murray, Kent, could take that wheel, because it was going to do a rotation, and just by touching it and moving it just a little bit and running their hand over it and looking at the brakes, can see a million things all at once. Sure. Feel and see things for the good of the vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the themes that I really hear coming out from all of us here is communicating communicating our value, communicating our skill and things like that. So for example, if we go back to the analogy, I don't use the word oil change in any of my coaching training. It's always the word maintenance service, is when you actually explain what you actually do, right? In terms of taking a look, what are the parts of that you do, and how you replace the drain plug gasket. And, I had one of my clients lose a brake job from a fleet. They had a new fleet manager, and that happens sometimes, right? A new manager comes in, going to cut costs, and lost the brake job, and the vehicle went somewhere else, and then the brakes failed, and it ended up back at his place. And the owner said to the new fleet manager, could you please come by, and I'm going to stay late today, and we're going to do this brake job, and you're going to watch me. Right now, we can't do this with every single client, but Jared was just so frustrated with this whole situation. You got to come down. I need some of your time, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you. And the guy says, I had no idea the difference in the quality of how you approach a brake job. He said, I had no idea. And he got the fleet back.
So I have a question for you experts. From a service advisor's perspective, we always say that sometimes we go too deep into technology, and we, you put a technician on the counter, and then, they know too much, and then they overwhelm the client. But recently, guys, I live in the woods, right? And we have leaves, a million leaves that come down every year. And so I finally decided to get leaf filter. And I got it, and the salesperson walked me through the detail. And when I signed the deal, I felt extremely satisfied that I got value because of what that person was going to do. And yeah, I had a chance to watch what that installer did, but I felt right about saying yes to the deal because I got a little bit more information than we're just going to keep leaves out of your gutter. And I guess from a service advisor's perspective, Mary, Bill, Kent, maybe it's a little better to go through this. Listen, we're putting rust prohibitive. We're scuffing down all the rust areas. We're doing all these things. You should feel confident that this brake job is going to really bring value to your car and your stopping ability, and it's going to last the timeline that it should.
Even though I was the one that brought that up, I'm going to sound like I'm changing direction or saying two different things.
Yeah, but you're Murray.
Yeah. So if you have the right clientele, all right, which is a journey for a shop to get the right clientele, they want transparency, and they want control of their day, and they want control of their monies. They really don't need a ton of detail because you're already meeting your professional obligations. They assume that you're doing a great job on their car, and they don't need a ton of extra pictures about different things, right? So there's a segment, right? The check-in process went smoothly, the estimating process went smoothly, the update at 3 went smoothly, the pickup and payment went smoothly, the car runs exactly the way it's supposed to. I understand my warranty. I got my complimentary roadside assistance package. I'm good. I don't need to know that you got 20 roll-lock discs and you polished the hubs and the whatever that way, right? But on the flip side, I do believe there are many consumers who need to know a little bit more of what we do. And because of technology, I suggest that people use their social. People always ask me for social media content, and rather than showing pictures of rotors, this stupid customer drove this car right down to the rotor fins, why don't we have videos about here's how a lot of people do brake jobs and here's how we do brake jobs, right? People are looking for content for Facebook, content for their websites, for blogs and that kind of stuff like that. Is talk about it in those kind of contexts and then point people, if they have a question, point them to, hey, look at this is how we do a brake job. If you want to really see the difference, here's how we do a brake job and the hub cleaning and that kind of stuff like that. So using that kind of information, advisors need to understand it, to know it, to explain it for the detail-oriented client, because you are going to have great clients who do want more information, right? Which we have to be prepared for. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. Hey guys, this has been incredible. Thank you for what a great episode. But Ken, I want to ask you about, is there a lot of shop owner burnout going on out there?
I think there's a lot of owner burnout. There's a lot of employee burnout. I think there's just burnout widespread. But I put owner burnout because I think it's a lot more damaging. And maybe this is, I'm not trying to be, self-aggrandizing or whatever. But as an owner, as a leader, if you're burnt out, the rest of your team is going to feel that, right? Your company, your organization is going to take the personality on of the owner. And if you're burnt out, you got nothing left in the tank, everyone will feel that. And I think it's part of your responsibility to manage yourself. I mean, we all get, to a point of burnout. I was recently, and that's what I was talking about. I took a break. I shut my phone off, put it in the car while I was gone for 4 days. I didn't touch it because I could see that my employees were seeing that I was getting burnout. I was dying. I was like, oh, okay, here's another problem. Let's do this, right? When you're in a point of exhaustion, you make bad choices because you don't have the wherewithal to flesh out options. You don't have the wherewithal to ask the right questions or even have the willpower to discuss those questions, right? I don't know about you guys, but there's some times where I come home and I go, hold on, kids, I just got to take a moment because I'm still kind of decompressing from the day, right? And so we want to monitor that and make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position of burnout, again, for our team's benefit.
Because if you are, they are.
Yeah.
And
you talk differently, right? About situations.
Yeah. And when you're this owner who's like, man, I'll be so glad when I sell this place. I'll be, when you start to express that, what are your employees thinking? What's my future here? If all he's worried about is how he's going to finish this, how he's going to sell this, how he's moving on, how he's ready to retire, it's like, well, I don't think there may not be a future for me here. I mean,
we have a responsibility about what we communicate to our team. If we are at that point where like, oh, this is just another customer there, I'm so sick of these people bringing in these POSs and, that's a drastic example, but the way that you talk about things, your team is going to emulate. They're going to start thinking, they're going to start, speaking that way, or even worse, they're going to say, well, I probably don't have a future here. I better go look somewhere else. Even in the face of adversity, you still have to be strong. You still have to be competent. You still have to be there, or at least communicate, hey, I'm a little burnt out. I need to take a respite. Can you handle these things for me while I just go recharge? Because I have a responsibility to be there for my team. And I want to make sure I don't get completely burnt out. I got to be here for you guys, right? Even just communicating that.
When you have to lead by example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
if you're going to be a bad example, then you're going to have what? Bad attitudes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's always people do what we do, not what we say, right?
It's such a hard thing because humans are flawed and we all make mistakes. Again, I make mistakes too. And though we espouse that we are supposed to act this way, this is what you should do. Even I come up against instances where I'm like, man, today was a really rough day. I'm having a hard time. And it's about then talking about grace, about, hey, some humility and being open and honest and communicating that, right? Because if our team, the thing is, they want to be successful. They want to be good at whatever they're doing and putting their energy and will and effort into. They want to succeed. And they're looking to us to understand what winning looks like. And if we're talking in a sense of this is what the level is, they're gonna rise to that level and perform at that level because that's what they expect will help them succeed.
Yeah.
If we're talking poorly about the types of vehicles that are coming in, well, they're going to start talking poorly about the vehicles that are coming in because that's what they think we want to hear.
Yeah. Well,
how about when you're talking poorly about an employee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Then I have to wonder how you talk about me when I'm not in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what causes burnout. Like what's bringing it on in the first place. So, for example, are we working 12-hour days, 7 days a week? If whatever, right? Do we, as a blue collar kind of industry, because as a generalization, we have a culture of hard physical work is admired. If you don't work hard physically, you're a lazy bum, right? So I'm going to put in my time. I'm going to put in my hours. And but here's the thing: we've done the 12 hours for 7 days. What were the results of all that effort? We still didn't make any money. We just spun a lot of cars through the shop, right? So the idea is helping shop owners think about them. What motivates them? What is their identity? What are they trying to accomplish in their life? If they've sat down and thought to themselves, I want to be respected and admired. What do I want to be respected and admired for? Well, first of all, you think about your spouse and your kids, and if you're never home, there's an issue right there, right? If you want to be admired by your peers, chances are there's a handful of you guys that are beating each other up for not working hard enough. But most people are going to admire the fact that you seem to have a reasonably good lifestyle. Again, I'm not necessarily saying it has to be excessive, and that you seem to have some time on your hands. Your weekends are free and your evenings are free to go to sports games with your kids and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong. There's this idea that I feel guilty if I'm not working that I find with business owners and shop owners. And a lot of that comes from past human, like their own motivation, like how they see themselves, right? So I think a lot of burnout just comes from an aftermath of just go without actually thinking why we're go.
It's got to be a shift in perception on output, right? Because it's effort in versus output. It's not 1-to-1, right? And when you're a business owner, your decisions have, and not to, again, I'm not trying to put anybody at a higher level, but when you're an owner of a business, your decisions have a lot higher output. In the sense of like, are we going to hire another technician? Are we going to expand this? Are we going to increase our marketing? And that's where I think a lot of the burnout can come from is decision fatigue. Because not only, I'm not saying technicians don't make choices or service advisors don't make choices, but the outcome of those choices have far-reaching consequences. So if I'm going to make this choice, it's not just going to affect this, but it's going to affect the team, the customers, the community. I mean, those decisions have a lot of weight to them, and you're making a lot of them as you go through. So I had a client last week who was struggling with this. We were looking at systems and processes, and he's got a long list of things he needs to develop. And I was like, hold on. Because what you're not thinking about and not taking a second to understand is that you have a whole team that you are managing. And by the way, your team can help you do this. You do not have to spend all of your time and effort doing this one thing because, again, your choices are up here. And if we're putting them in positions of ownership in their work and all that, we're going to line them up to help the business achieve the goals of the business. And so if we should use that, we should leverage that. You are not the I'm trying to find a way to articulate this.
Well, here,
thank you, Bill. Step in.
What it is, it's a failure to delegate.
Yeah.
A lot of this fatigue and a lot of this stress comes from the owner's failure to delegate because, well, they may not do it as well as I would do it. I might as well do it myself if I want it done right. and then we fail to delegate. And then what also happens is those people fail to grow and they don't see opportunity with our companies or our organizations. And then 2 years later, we wonder why this great employee left. What happened? Well, there it is.
Well, it's their perception of contribution. This is how I've always contributed to the business, and so this is how I'm always going to do. It's like, no, as you move up, as you grow and scale, the things that you contribute are different. They change. Now it's up to your team to execute those things while you move on to the other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to hear you all talk about this. And by the way, thank you. This is some brilliant stuff. I've always had this decades thing going in my mind, but you know, how I was, how I acted, and what was I as a leader or a business person in my 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. And if you're doing it right, even though you're in the moment in time, you say, oh my God, I'm in my 40s. Is it really happening? You're not going to realize it until you look back into that grouping of years and say, I learned, I listened, I evolved, I grew. And you don't notice it day to day. But if you don't make a personal commitment to do it, then you'll never get where you want to be. To all of your points here is that you've got to grow as an individual, and you got to take your people with you.
Yes. And we all need outside perspectives to help us do that. You know, we are consultants, advisors, coaches, whatever terminology is
experts.
Experts. Thank you, Carm. Thank you for reminding me of that. But we have experts in our lives. And I have mentioned my coach, Brenda, and how I was so bad at planning 4 years ago. I went through an assessment, industrial psychological assessment, and my ability to react to the unexpected was off the scale. I was really good at it. My planning skills were very low, and she pointed out to me, she says, is there a reason that your ability to react to the unexpected is because you plan so badly? So, the idea of a strength, coming from it's really a crutch from a weakness, right? And had a moment of just aha of how I have been living and why. I mean, we won't go into those details. And now my Google Calendar is got stuff in it in end of 2025 already. Like I plan now, and it has so much reduced that decision fatigue that you brought up. One of you guys brought up. So I'm just speaking personally. All of you guys need to find some outside, whether it's an automotive person or whether it's more of an executive coach or a life coach for the more personal issues. We all have blind spots to how we end up. And I tell you, it's life-saving in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, my coach, Rick, he worked on, I mean, just having an outside perspective, even validating that you're doing things the right way. That was one of my biggest hurdles was like, I've got to live up to my dad. Right. And so I'm comparing everything I'm doing to, is this at his level? Is this at, and I never gave myself credit because it wasn't, in my perception, it wasn't never good enough. And it took someone else's perspective, my coach, Rick, to tell me like, hey, you are crushing it. I need you to know that you're making the right choices. And I said, yeah, but, and he goes, no, hold on. You need to hear this. You're doing a good job. And it was like, I had that aha moment where, okay, all right, I'm going to dial it back a little bit,
You guys know that but was Costello's partner, right?
Yeah, but
well, and there's this thing that they call imposter syndrome, and people have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. I thank God you said some confession there, Kent, because I can say some confession about my dad, who never, and again, I don't know what Cecil does with or for you when it comes to guiding you and complimenting you, and but my dad never ever told me that God, Carm, you're doing a great job. I mean, you were talking about my 20s and 30s. I heard it from other people. He would go out and say to a salesperson, an associate, he says, well, Carm's doing a really good job. Did you see this latest thing that he did? But he would never say it to me. And I had to hear it from, your dad thinks you're doing a great job. I says, would you go and tell him to tell me?
Yeah.
So I don't want to throw my dad under the bus. He says it all the time. It was my fault in not listening.
You weren't listening. Okay, great.
I didn't hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right.
I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if everybody listening can pick up on what we're saying is fatigue, decision fatigue, burnout all these places come from our inner motivations and what is driving us. And sometimes we're not satisfying that need. And so what we need to do is reflect on that. And if we can sort of understand our own value personally, we'll begin to stop that hamster on the wheel. And I think we'll be healthier.
Yeah. But Bill says, well, it's not who he was. Okay, Bill, I'm with you. I get it. But if you're a leader of your team and you have some fascinating people, they are just incredibly smart and they're really gifted. Just because you don't want to give them a compliment doesn't mean that you shouldn't. And
no, I agree. I mean,
yeah. If it's not who you are, then fine.
Then
find
you need
5 minutes.
to learn that.
5 minutes and be the person you're not and give somebody a compliment.
But you need to learn that. Somebody, nobody unfortunately brought that to your father's attention. Nobody ever shared that to your father to say, look, here's something you're missing. And this is something you could do, or you could do better, or that just never happened.
Frankly, I really believe he was a workaholic. I don't think he really stopped for a moment. He loved to brag about stuff to other people, but never to his own people.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was a great learning experience for me over all the years it took me years to reflect back on it. Wow. And there's nothing wrong with going back and reliving a feeling that you have and seeing what you could do with it today.
Well, the value in the lesson for you was you learned that you didn't want to be who your father was to you as a supervisor, as a manager, as a leader. Yeah. And so the lesson for Carm would be better.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to check with Tracy to see how it's going.
All right. Yeah. Do me great test, Murray. Thank you so much.
Hey, I wanted to make a couple of thoughts on delegation. If we have a minute, Carm, are we okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That Bill brought up delegation, and I think that he made a really valid point about that. And a common area that I work with my clients is that thing. And we have to realize that the delegation is actually a process. It's not just giving somebody a list and go do this. So in other words, have you taught them? So do they have the knowledge to do that task or make that decision? Do they know how to apply that knowledge, right? Can they demonstrate back to you that they can do that task or make that decision? And at that point, you can delegate it to them, because now you're not managing them, you're managing the process, right? So if they don't carry it out, we can go back to them and say, okay, did I miss a step teaching you? Oh, crap, yes, I forgot to tell you that under these circumstances, we press that button. Or and walk them, I've got a client working on a debrief program with his shop. Brilliant guy, Mike. Someday he's going to be on your show, Carm. And he's working with his team on when something goes wrong, we're going to have a debrief the way an airline or NASA does when something goes wrong. They debrief together so it never happens again, right? But you have to do this in the context of safety, like emotional safety, and a place where there's no finger pointing and that thing. So he's creating a whole set of documentation when something goes wrong on how they're going to debrief that situation and work with the team so that it's, they can prevent that from happening again and still build up the person who may have made that mistake, right? Identify the lack of training, identify the situation. In many cases, the mistakes that happen by technicians are because they're rushed, interrupted, or pulled off jobs, right? That's a service advisor issue or an owner issue, not a technician issue.
Correct.
Brilliant stuff. Can't wait to meet Mike someday. This was great. You can watch this over and over again on the CAMP Facebook page. Coalition of Automotive Management Professionals, CAMP. Bill Haas Performance Consulting. Kent Bullard from the Institute of Automotive Business Excellence. And Murray Voth from RPM Training. This is a blast. As always, every month, we always have such great advice from our industry's coaching experts. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.